But first, we do dive deeper into President Trump saying he believes Ukraine can take back all of its territory from Russian forces. CBS News reporter Olivia Gazis joins us now. And Olivia, thank you very much for joining us here. You know, it was only 6 weeks ago that President Trump was saying there would be land swapping with Ukraine and Russia. What has happened since then that might explain this reversal we're seeing?
Absolutely, Nancy. As you just showed there appears to be an extraordinary pivot on the part of President Trump that made it appear to take many delegates here by surprise. He gave little indication that it was his mindset even this morning during those extended remarks during the General Assembly or during his brief encounter just before going into his meeting with President Zelensky. But he clearly came out of that meeting with an altered view, and we're still working to learn what exactly transpired during the hour that the two leaders were meeting. President Zelensky did meet with reporters immediately following that encounter. He said he wouldn't share details of the conversation, but he was glad that President Trump had good information and that he could absolutely be a game changer in altering the course of this conflict. Now, as you've noted, President Trump has shifted his position on this conflict in the past, and there's no explicit novel U.S. commitment mentioned in the statement that he made, more than it was the expression of a very newfound opinion. One thing that did also markedly shift was his description of his relationship with Vladimir Putin. He's no longer extolling it as the key to ending this conflict. In fact, he said that relationship didn't mean anything.
Very interesting choice of words there coming out of the UN today, Olivia. And also President Trump met with several European leaders today. What did they say about the war in Ukraine, and how do they fit into what happens next year?
Yes, he's had back-to-back meetings with leaders from across the world. Earlier today, he met with the head of the EU Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, with the French President, Emmanuel Macron. Mr. Macron also said that this new stance on Ukraine is the right one. He agreed that the Russian economy was suffering greatly, and he said it was a common objective for the U.S. and Europe to see this conflict ended in a just and sustainable way. Ms. von der Leyen also said that President Trump was right in pushing the Europeans to reduce their dependency on Russian energy imports. We know that the bloc has reduced those significantly as a whole, but there are still outliers in Slovakia and in Hungary. Notably, President Trump was also asked about Hungary and whether he had asked Prime Minister there, Viktor Orban, to reduce his consumption of Russian energy. President Trump said he hadn't spoken to him, but he called him a friend and said he probably might if he gave him a call. The two leaders may in fact hold a call in the near future.
Olivia Gazis reporting there from UN headquarters in New York. Olivia, thank you.
Thank you.
And during his remarks at the UN today, President Trump also made some claims about his immigration policies, including this one.
On our southern border, we have successfully repelled a colossal invasion. And for the last 4 months, and that's 4 months in a row, the number of illegal aliens admitted and entering our country has been zero. Hard to believe.
And CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez is here to fact check some of the president's claims. Camilo, you hear the president saying right there.
If you come illegally into the United States, you're going to jail.
So that number is zero, as you could hear it playing out over us.
Yes.
Is that comment accurate?
Well, it is true that there has been a dramatic and truly historic drop in illegal immigration at the U.S.-Mexico border since President Trump took office for a second time. Illegal crossings there, Nancy, are actually at the lowest level since the 1960s. But we have to make a distinction between border crossings and the number the president is talking about, that zero number. The president, Nancy, is likely referring to the number of migrants released by Border Patrol into the U.S. Customs and Border Protection has reported that over the past 4 months, that agency has not released a single migrant into the U.S. after they cross into the country illegally. Still, there are still some people crossing into the country illegally, including along the U.S.-Mexico border. For example, in August, more than 6,000 people were arrested by Border Patrol after crossing into the U.S. illegally. The policy change now is that, for the most part, they are being held until they are deported, or they're being deported right away.
And Camilo, I also want to ask you about President Trump's deportation strategy, which he also talked about today. Let's take a listen to that first.
If you come illegally into the United States, you're going to jail, or you're going back to where you came from, or perhaps even further than that. You know what that means?
So the president there seems to be alluding to agreements with more than a dozen countries to accept deportees from the United States. What countries is he talking about here, and what are they getting in return for this? I know that this is something you've been following very closely.
Yeah, critical questions, Nancy. To level set, the Trump administration has mounted this aggressive diplomatic effort to convince as many countries around the globe, including in Africa, in Europe, in Asia, to take in people who are not their citizens as deportees. For example, it has brokered agreements with countries like El Salvador in Latin America, Costa Rica, Panama, also Kosovo in Europe, and also African countries like South Sudan, Rwanda, and Uganda. So those countries can take citizens who are not their own. And in terms of what these countries are actually getting in return, it is unclear because these agreements have been secretive in nature. We do know that El Salvador, for example, did receive millions of dollars from the U.S. to house Venezuelan migrants deported from the U.S. and to house them at a notorious mega prison known as Secot. And South Sudan, when it accepted non-Sudanese immigrants, was facing visa sanctions from the U.S. So the U.S. has tremendous political and economic leverage over many of these countries.
All right, Camilo, we always appreciate your insight and your context, especially on these issues. Thank you very much. Also this morning, President Trump took aim at climate change, calling the concept of a carbon footprint a hoax.
It's the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world, in my opinion. I've been right about everything. And I'm telling you that if you don't get away from the green energy scam, your country is going to fail.
Now, earlier, CBS News senior coordinating producer for climate, Tracy Wholf, fact-checked those claims.
It's hard to say that it's a scam when 20%, more than 20% of our energy generation in 2023 here in the United States came from renewable energy. I think he also likes to say that it's too expensive. We have done very extensive research, analysis, spoken to more than half a dozen experts that study energy markets. Renewable energy, clean, wind and solar, battery storage, those really are the cheapest forms of energy to generate. Now, it's worth understanding that to have cheap and reliable energy, you do need an all-of-the-above approach, combining some renewable energy with some backup natural gas. But listen, the reality is the markets are going to win here, despite what President Trump wants. It's cheaper to generate renewable energy than to build out fossil fuel infrastructure. But it's also worth remembering to follow the money here. Back during his second campaign, he promised the fossil fuel energy that he would support them. And clean energy is a risk to that business, right? So he's going to try to do whatever he can to support the fossil fuel industry because clean energy is certainly not going to help them raise their profits.